Hello everyone, I'm here today because I have been reading in the past few months all the international Booker winners of the years, and when the prize was started it was actually a prize for an author, not a book. So I have just chosen one book from that author and read it, and then after a few years, I think in 2016-17, it became like a prize for a book. So then I read the books that were in that prompt basically. But yeah, the prize was started in 2005, and the first person to get the international booker was Ismail Kadare, who is from Albania, and the book I read from him was The Traitors Niche. And this book is about this boy that his job is to take care of this niche on the wall where they put the heads of traitors, so literally Traitors Niche. And so yeah, his job is to take care of it, and it's a very tricky job because he's not supposed to put too much attention to it because they're traitors, but at the same time they want it to last so people can see it, and it's a whole ordeal. So it's like a very difficult job, and this is like in the Ottoman Empire, if I remember correctly. I found that I liked the idea and kind of the characters, but the whole, like, the writing was like very male visceral kind of thing, which is not my thing. So it's not one of my favorite authors or books, and I'm not dying to pick up anything else from Ismail Kadare because I have heard that all his books kind of are the same kind of tone, and that's what I didn't like about the book. But nevertheless, it was an interesting read. The next author to win in 2007, because at that time it was every 2 years, it was Chinua Achebe from Nigeria, and I have read several things from him. I have read Things Fall Apart, The Arrow of God. I have also read kind of non-fiction from him. This is the one that I own, which is African's Tarnished Name. And I think I prefer his non-fiction. He is a very smart man, and he has a lot of very interesting thoughts about colonialism. And I think that comes through more in his non-fiction than it does in his fiction. I found his fiction a little bit flat. Like, I was not engaged. It was like the story was very what you would expect from an anti-colonialist story about people going to Africa and stuff. So I understand that he was one of the first ones to do it, and that has merit in itself, but I didn't find the books as books particularly engaging, but the non-fiction I did. The non-fiction is good. So yeah, I think that was a very well-deserved prize. The next winner in 2009 was Alice Munro from Canada, and I read Dear Life from her a long time ago, and to be honest, I did not remember anything. I don't think it was particularly memorable. I think I was reading another one of her books at one point, and I accidentally forgot it on the plane, and I just never tried to find another copy or anything because I was not engaged at all. So yeah, it's fine. It's fine for me. Maybe I will appreciate it more now that I have read more stuff and I have a more defined understanding of prose and things like that, but at the time it was just not something I was enjoying overly. Then in 2011, Philip Roth from the USA won, and I have read The Human Stain from him, and this is another of those authors that is very, very male. Like, you cannot see it's a male from the way he writes, which is not my favorite. And again, I read this book and I didn't feel like I wanted to pick up anything else from him. So yeah, I find that often that happens in the international booker. Very male books tend to make an appearance. And then the next winner in 2013 was Lydia Davis, which is also from the USA, and I have read Can't and Won't by her. And this is kind of auto-fiction interconnected short stories kind of thing about her life as a writer. and it was quite like innovative in a way. Like it has these kind of very short chapters, and it also has long chapters, and it has like a, I don't know, very specific way of writing that is like quite experimental, and I understand why they wanted to recognize that kind of experiments, and I think that the message and all of that was quite good, but it was also very episodic, which I kind of guess it's the point, but I'm not overly fond of episodic books, and so for me this was just okay. I didn't overly engage with it, and I don't think it's one that is gonna stay with me particularly. Then in 2015 the winner was László Krasznahorkai by from Hungary, and the book I read from him was Satantango, and this is a book about a village, and this girl dies, and it's kind of like whose fault it is, and the different characters kind of give their opinion, and it's kind of like nobody wants to take responsibility, because it's not like one of those things that is like from a specific person, but it's kind of like like a series of things that went wrong and she died, and then so half of the book is about her death, and the second half is about after her death, what happens, like the government wants to investigate and stuff, and it's written in a very interesting way, because the chapters in the first part go like 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then in the second part go like the other way around, so like 7, 6, 5, or like, you know, the other way around. So it has like that circular way to it. It is one of those books that is just like a block of text throughout, which are not my favorite. I do like to be able to take breaks whenever I want, and if you have that kind of thing for 20 pages, you have to read the 20 pages, right? So that's not my favorite practical wise, but I think it was a very slow book, and it was one of those books about like the everyday kind of thing, which yeah, sometimes they work for me and sometimes they don't, and this one I found a bit tedious to go through, and maybe that was also my mindset at the time I read this. So I do think it's a good book, and I think it's a good writer, and again it has a lot of merit on the way that he experiments with words and with writing and all of that. I don't think it's something that I particularly enjoy though, so yeah, that is something to take into account as well. Then in 2016 it was the first time that they actually started doing books instead of authors, and in 2016 The Vegetarian by Han Kang won. Now I have read this in Dutch, and I thought it was okay, but I want to reread it in English because I think I will have gotten a lot more from it in English. I just think that the language barrier for me was a little bit too hard. I think the idea was very interesting, and I think that Han Kang is a very good writer. I have read other things by her, and I think that she can be very visceral in the way that she writes. So yeah, I want to reread this to get the full experience without the language barrier, but even with the language barrier I thought there were some elements of it, of how society treats women specifically, that were very, very powerful and interesting. Then in 2017 David Grossman won with A Horse Walks into a Bar, and I hated this book with a passion. This is a book about a comedian in Israel that makes very bad jokes, and it's just like the book follows one of his performances in which he makes a lot of bad jokes, racist jokes, and very like not very thoughtful stuff about men and women and Palestinians and like just racist stuff, and it's never challenged, so I don't know if it was like ironic or not. I hope it was, but it didn't feel like it, so I was just like not interested in it. I hated it. However, in 2018, Olga Tokarczuk won with Flights, which is a book that was in my favorites the year I read it, so that was a win for me. I really like Olga Tokarczuk. I think she's a really talented writer, and this has all the elements for me not to like it, and I still liked it. So this is kind of, it's not exactly short stories, it's like thoughts and things. It's like about a woman that kind of travels around, and it's like doesn't have a very clear goal in life, and it's kind of about movement through time, about like physical movement in airports, but also like movement in your mind, like changing your mind, and yeah, all kinds of things. Very philosophical, but she writes beautifully, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think it took me for a ride that I was not expecting, and maybe it's not the best Olga Tokarczuk to start with, but I think that it definitely is very well done, and it's not something I have seen anywhere else the way that she does it, so I think it is very special, and yeah, I would recommend it. In 2019, Jokha al-Harthi won with Cesal Bodies, and it was interesting. It was very different from what I thought it was gonna be, I think. It's a family story of a well-off family in Oman, and there's like a lot of cultural things going on, and they have slaves in this house, and it's supposed to be like not modern day, but not like 1800s kind of thing. Like they have cars and stuff, so it was weird to see slaves, but at the same time, like, the women had a lot more agency than I thought they would, based on the fact that Oman is a fairly conservative country. So yeah, it was interesting. Like, I didn't expect the themes that appear in the book. It was a lot about the culture of Oman and how that works. I will say there were too many characters for me to be able to fully connect with all of them. It was just a bit too much. I think it will have benefited from cutting down on the amount of characters that we follow. But yeah, the story itself and the like aspects of the book that were discussed, I thoroughly enjoyed. It's just the storytelling was not necessarily the most polished, in my opinion. Then in 2020, the winner was The Discomfort of Evening by Marieke Lucas Rijneveld, which I also read in Dutch, but that is a Dutch book, so that makes more sense, and my Dutch was much better than then. So yeah, I read this in Dutch, and I just found it very disgusting. It is about a girl that loses her brother in a skating accident at some point, and then she gets into very weird behaviors to try to deal with death and grief. And yeah, she talks a lot about her bowel movements, and she talks a lot about, like, she has there is a joke that the translator refused to translate, apparently, and it's just about like a bad joke about Nazis, about, yeah, like gas chambers and stuff. It's not even funny. So yeah, I didn't love that one. The writing is supposed to be very poetic and stuff, but I guess I cannot judge that in the Dutch book because my Dutch is not good enough. But the story and all the disgusting stuff, I was not up for it. Then in 2021, the winner was All at Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop, which again is a very disgusting book. It's about two soldiers, African soldiers, that are fighting for for France in the First World War, and because they are black, they are perceived as more brutal and sadistic than other soldiers, and so one of them runs with it, and that does become very unhinged, and he takes into like it becomes a habit of him to cut the hands of all his enemies, and I think he ate them or something. I don't know. It was disgusting as well, and I just felt like the book was trying too hard to make me feel something, but there was nothing behind those feelings. So yeah, in that sense, it did provoke an emotional response, but yeah, that's all that it did, and I was expecting a little bit more. So a bit of a disappointment. It's not necessarily a horrible book, but I was expecting more. And then in 2022, the winner was Tom of Sand by Ketanjali Sri, and again, this was a bit of a one of the ones that I felt disappointed because of my expectations rather than because of the book. So this follows an old woman that is kind of losing her mind in India, and we kind of go back into her life and look at all the political and military unrest that went on in India in the last 80 years or so. And I thought it was going to be a lot more about that unrest, but that only comes into play fully at the end of the book, and it's more about this woman just struggling and seeing ghosts and trying to assert her point of view when people do not really listen to her because they think she's not okay, so might as well not listen to her, which happens often with all women. And I think knowing that now, I will want to reread the book and just look at it from the point of view of what it was written rather than what I expected it to be. I think it's a good book, and I understand why it's here, and I was actually rooting for this one on that year's because it was compared to the other books I could recognize it was a good one. So yeah, I think that one was a good book. It's just not, I couldn't read it the way I wanted to read it, and so now that I have those expectations changed, I think it will be good for me to reread it. And then the last winner, at the time that I'm filming this, I think maybe the 2024 winner will be announced, but in 2023 was the last winner so far, and it was Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov. And this is about two men that discover that having Alzheimer's patients in environments that they recognize from their past is beneficial to them, and so they start this asylum in which each room represents a decade, and they have the furniture and the foods and stuff that were common in that time, and the patients kind of choose which decade they want to live in, and so this idea eventually expands to be also in hotels and other things, and at some point countries decide we also want to do that, so each country has a referendum in Europe to go back to a certain decade, and that brings all kinds of problems, so what do we do with phones and common technology now that were not back then? We just ignore it, and if you cross the border you would be in a different decade. So what happens with these people, and what happens with the horrible things that happen? Do we repeat them? If a country chooses to go back to 1920s, do they experience the world wars again? All that kind of thing. And it was very interesting as a thought experiment. I think as a story, the characters and the story and the plot was not really there, but that was not the point of the book. I think the point of the book was really to have this thought experiment, what would happen if we went back in time willingly. And I thought it was very interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know it's not a perfect book, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I would also recommend that as a thought experiment. So yeah, as you can see, like, it's a bit of a mix for me, the International Booker. There are some books that I really didn't care about, there are some books that I loved, there are some books that I hated with a passion. So it is a bit of a mixed bag. That's why I don't follow as much anymore, because I think that some of my favorite books have come from this prize, but I think I can know which ones are going to be the ones I love, and they are not always the ones that win. So I just take it as a suggestion box now, rather than a prize to follow and read all the books for. But I'm thankful that it exists, and I read amazing things like this one, or like Time Shelter, that I don't think I would have read otherwise because of this prize. I'm excited to see what comes out as a winner in 2024, and I'll probably read that one just to keep up with them. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Let me know in your comments if you have read any of these books, what you thought about them, if you want to read any of them, or if you have any other thoughts about the International Booker. And until next video, bye!